afternoon, and welcome to Political No Brainer Podcast, the podcast where we move past winner takes all politics and into real conversations. I'm Jeff Rabinowitz, and this season we're bringing in voices from all sides to challenge assumptions, bridge divides, and build a better understanding of today's biggest issues. And today I am excited to be joined by Beth Green, someone who has been in the game of change for the longest time, 6 decades now, right? You've done
Oh,
a lot
longer
too.
than that. Longer than that.
Longer than that. I've been at it maybe 2.5 to 3, and I used to think that was a lot of time in on the front lines. But you've done a lot of things. You've been a contributor to the Huntington Post. You've also you've also written 6 books, and so we want to hear all about you. We want to know everything on your mind. I and everything, and I'm definitely one to ask questions and listen. And so why don't you tell us about yourself, Beth, and get right into it?
Ah, my God, which decade? I'm 80. That's how come I'm saying that it's more than 6 decades. But I just was born thinking about things and being concerned about human consciousness. And because when I was 5 years old, I was giving lectures on prejudice to my family. So,
Wow.
and that was kind of so that's why I say it's really been longer than 6 decades. And I just was born that way. And it wasn't in my family, it was just in me. And when I was 9 years old, I read a book about the Spanish Civil War. Now, that was 1954, just to give you context of when I was nine,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
And we were doing these, you had to get under your seat at school because we were afraid of the bomb. And they added the words under God to the Pledge of Allegiance. And I refused to salute the flag anymore because I believed in the separation of church and state, even though I grew up in a Jewish family. So um, a lot of things happened. And the most important thing was that Senator Joseph McCarthy was on television and the Army McCarthy hearings. And it was a terrible time of people being repressed, imprisoned, blacklisted, and so on for having the wrong opinions. Does that sound like today?
Does that sound like today? I was just going to say that actually. That sounds a lot like today. Like we're really, I remember people saying we're at the precipice of a constitutional crisis, and I said we're really not because the judiciary is agreeing with everything the president puts out there. So it's
Pretty
not a
much.
constitutional crisis. It's okay.
Well, some in the judiciary are not agreeing with them. The Supreme Court is a little bit backwards. But I do want to tell you one thing about that time. So that was 1954, and it was because of all of that, they threatened to expel me from elementary school,
Wow.
and because I wouldn't salute the flag, and they failed me in civics, and at that time, I I took on the mantle of socialism, but not what people think of as socialism, of what socialism really was, because I read about the anti-fascist movement in Spain during the Spanish Civil War, and of course we had Franco for so many decades. So it was quite a time for me, and I just had this kind of political awakening.
So it's interesting. It's kind of funny because our starts are kind of similar. I couldn't read, and my dad taught me how to read, and the teachers
Yeah,
really didn't think I'd ever be able to read. So I thought to myself, when we would go to the library, there was nothing that really interested me other than the newspapers that were hanging in the corner of the room, and I would read them. And that's all I would read. I became a current events walk. It really interested me to read that. And I never really I couldn't see. We had index cards back then. I couldn't make heads or tails of them. So there used to be this giant little giant
oh, I
square thing,
remember those,
little
of course.
drawers, and I couldn't make heads or toes of where to find books and stuff. So always really just stuck to that corner of the library. It was a pretty big corner with lots of newspapers. So everything you're saying is interesting because I started at a very young age, and here we are again, history repeating itself. It's kind of a time where I say, just like McCarthyism back then, a lot of things change for the better. So there's that old saying, never waste a good crisis. We're in a crisis now, I believe, and I think that a lot of good good's going to come from it. But one of my biggest concerns now is a lot of people are getting hurt. So even
Yes.
though in the end, at the end of the day, I think a lot of good is going to come from it, but a lot of people are getting hurt. You
I
know,
feel exactly the same way, Jeff. Exactly. I'm trying to stay calm, cool, and collected about the whole thing because I've seen, I went through the 60s, I went through the 70s, I was an activist until I had a spiritual psychic awakening around in 1980. And then I became an intuitive counselor and a spiritual teacher. I call it spiritual activism, though. And so I'm trying to look at the big picture of what's happening and how incredibly activated people are and how people are awakening. And so I see all of that as possible. But the fact that so many people are being hurt is just devastating.
yeah, and
And
I don't see.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the people that are getting hurt, I don't see them ever returning back to here. I don't see them ever. I think that there will be a new path for a lot of people in the future. I think that in the next administration, they're gonna have to come up with a immigration policy. You know, to
Yeah.
say for a minute that the Dreamers aren't here legally because Barack Obama created the Dreamers program. So if he was able to create the Supreme Court rule that President Trump can overturn it, well, it's probably somewhat in some way the I guess you could say it's how it is. It's how it works. But the
Yeah.
fact of the matter is, are they coming back? I don't think so. No, I think that they're being removed from this country for no reason other than they never had a path to viable citizenship, and that's a
And
big
some of
mistake
them
in
now,
our history.
right now, they're going and looking at naturalized citizens. I mean, they're being thrown out because there's too many dark-skinned people that they want to get rid of. And I think also there because they don't vote for the Republicans, but I think also it's just a way of throwing red meat at the working class so we don't really look at what's going on in the society and what's really bothering us, what is really oppressing us. They've done the same thing. It's always been scare people about something, get them off realizing what their real interests are, and suppress any kind of movement for radical change in the United States. And that's exactly what we need, an inner revolution and an economic and political and social revolution.
Well, I'm all, from the standpoint of economic revolution, one of the things I think we need is a revamp, or not at all a revamp, or some addition to our education system. We are heading into a situation where you simply, when you talk to people today, they're like, I'm barely able to pay the rent today. I'm barely able to get groceries today. And everything's going up next year, and
Yeah,
except for my income.
right,
And so now, so the reality is you're not surviving, just going to work and doing what you're supposed to do. So we need people to understand how to survive in this new economy. And the only ones that are really doing well in this new economy are the people that know how to navigate it. Nowadays, the way to navigate it is probably through investment, is probably through some sort of understanding. Everybody's like talking about Nancy Pelosi's trades on the stock market, and they created an app that show her trades. And I'm like, after you've seen her trades, the big bang is gone. The trade is done. The initial burst is gone. So
right,
how do we know what to trade in before we miss that opportunity? And the only thing I'm seeing on that front is a bunch of social media advertisement, a bunch of I don't believe in the advertisements I'm seeing about how pay me $6,000 for this course and I'll teach you how to make this
right.
kind of money. And so I don't know what's next for us. I'm always out there searching. I'm always on bringing the greatest guests, you being one of them. Always talking to people. I've had Lura Lucra, who's the president of the Independent Center for Independent Candidates, she's got great candidates out there thinking big, thinking innovative, thinking market disruption. How do we do it differently? And so that's what we need to get to these days. We need to understand. Warren Buffett once said the reason people aren't succeeding like they used to is because life is more complicated. Years ago, everybody was a farmer, so everybody had the skills they needed to succeed. Today, that's not the case. So, any thoughts on
Okay.
an education revolution?
Well, I see it differently. I do hear what you're saying, and I think that as a stopgap measure, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. So I understand where you're coming from. You're saying, okay, here is the system. How do we prepare people to navigate it? See, but I don't believe that that's the solution. I believe the solution is to change the system, not try to figure out how the handful of people, how you can become one of the handful of people who survives in this economy. See, I would like to, if you don't mind, I would really like to talk about the essence of the capitalist society and what the problem is and what we need to do about it so that everybody has a fair shake and has a decent life. And you see, just very fundamentally, people make money off of the labor of other people. That's how you get rich, even if it's, you are the stockholder who is getting the profit out of the worker. Now, in the old days, let's say you were in the barter system. Capitalism hasn't always existed. It is an economic, social, political system that exists now, but we're brainwashed into thinking it's the only way to be. But it isn't the only way to be. It is a way that has benefited certain people who now have enough power to make sure that it continues and so that they can keep ripping off everybody else. So let's say it was a barter system. You grew chickens. I grew pigs. I want a pig. You want a chicken. Whatever. We do barter. We know basically what the value is of the thing we're producing. So if we know that two chickens equal one pig, that's how we do it. But what happens is when you start having people hiring other people to do things, and I'm not saying that intrinsically is an evil thing, but when you start hiring people to do things, they cannot get the full value of what they've produced because otherwise you're not getting any profit. We're now in a profit oriented system rather than equality of value. So you want to make profit, you hire me. If you paid me the full value of the shoes that I made, you would have no profit. You'd have no incentive to have a company. So you want to get profit. Now, that to a degree makes sense when you have like a small business and you're trying to work it out. But what happens is you start getting more and more people doing the labor at higher levels of productivity, and more of the value of what you produce is going to the owners or to the stockholders, so that all the money is floating up. You're no longer getting, a chicken for your pig. You're getting a chicklet for your pig, right?
Right.
So you're working your ass off every day. Real wages, as you know, have not gone up, what, in 40 years? Yet productivity has increased, which means you're making more shoes, more shoes, more shoes, more shoes, and all the value and the profit of that goes to the owners, to the capitalists, to the people who now in a more alienated way own the stocks. They don't even have anything to do with shoes. They've never even walked into the factory. They're just making money off money off money off money, but it all basically comes from labor. Now that's things are getting very complicated with AI and so on and robots. And by the way, Marx, who was not a Soviet communist, Marx was an observer of the economy and a very smart guy. And he saw what was going on and he predicted this stuff, 150 years ago, almost 200 years ago. He said, oh, it's going to get to the point that you're going to have less and less labor going into the production of that shoe. Now, here's the other side of this. And I'm sorry to be long winded, but I think
No,
it.
no, go on. I'm listening. I'm
Okay,
learning.
good. Now, how much does the owner pay the worker? They only pay the worker what they need to in order to keep the worker alive to come to work the next day. What do I need to go back to work? And that's what we're getting paid. We are getting the bare minimum to keep us going. They're taking all the gravy. They're taking all the profit. They're taking all the value, and we're getting the pittance. Now, when women are added to the equation, it gets even more interesting because traditionally, women have done all the housework and raised the children and taken care of the men, even when they were working in the factories, also, because women were not traditionally full-time housewives, not working class women. Working class women were working in the tobacco factories and in the garment industry and so on. So they worked in the factories, they went home, the husbands came home broken. The women were supposed to put them together, feed them, and then bear the children for the next generation of workers. So there's this whole arena of work that is not paid for. So, what is it that the worker is getting? The bare minimum to keep him, and now we're doing it as in a sexist way, but it could be a man staying home taking care of the children. It doesn't make any difference to me. It's the value of the work. So what Mark said, the value of labor power is what it costs to reproduce that worker, and that includes the value of what women are doing for free. And so when you start looking at it, it is no wonder that there's more and more income inequality because we are still being given the bare minimum to survive. Oh, yeah, no, let's say, oh, you can buy a car or you can do this or that or the other thing, and or get a Nintendo game or whatever they are. uh, but that doesn't really change what you are going through just to survive. You can barely pay, you said it, you can barely pay the rent or the mortgage or the grocery bill. And we're supposed to keep going and keep getting reproduced so that there's somebody to hire and somebody to buy the goods. See, and Henry Ford was very smart. He said, if the workers can't buy the cars, who's going to buy them? So he was a fascist, by the way, but he did understand that. So you have to pay people enough so that they can buy the products that they're producing. But that isn't what's happening. It's all it's all going up to the top. So that is the way the capitalist system is set up. And more in the last decades, we have monopolies, we have more and more social control, and you see the plight of workers. People are drinking, people are, taking drugs, they're depressed, they're living on a very low level emotionally and spiritually. They don't have time off, they're just barely making it.
So that's there's a lot to unpack here. So let me start with a couple of them. One thing is true. There's not a there's the workers are working hard, getting very little. So that brings me to 2 points really. One is the new tax law that just passed, where we're basically we're going to depend on the generosity of the employers now. They've got more money to keep. They're keeping. Some companies aren't even paying any taxes to begin with. Now they've got a bigger tax cut on the way. And then that's called trickle down. It's going to trickle down to the employees. It's not going to happen. Never has.
Never
The
has.
other thing, it never has. I mean, I'm not going to argue that point. I don't have to with you. We know that, but there are some people who believe in trickle down economics. Basically, what it is like it's a $4 trillion cash infusion into the economy. It'll never make it to the workers, but it will grow the economy. For certain, if you inject $4 trillion into the American economy, you're going to see growth. You're going to see investment in new stuff, but it'll never make it to the workers. Now, the point is, to that point, and I'm just going to make that point real quick, the worker's going to say, look at the economy, it's booming. But you're not. You're
Right.
not booming. Yes, the economy is growing. Yes, there's this new high rise building going up in your behind your neighborhood, but it has nothing to do with your economic growth. So there is that illusion. But then comes the idea of what workers are doing, and the whole discussion of jobs are just heading overseas in droves. There, there is automation, just like you said. And automation isn't just robots, and it's certainly not just AI. For example, automation very much is there. They used to call a theme park or a resort, and a person would answer the phone and take your information and your husband's information and your child's information and the destinations you wanted to do and the rides and the excursions. Now you do it on an app. So you're providing that labor to that company for free. You're doing
Very
it.
true. Exactly. They're
So
finding out
the
more
inno-
and more ways to rip us off.
the innovation in technology that's happening today is a labor saver. It's all, I mean, you
Yeah.
everywhere you go. I mean, I get calls all the time. If you go on our app, you're going to get $25 off your first three purchases. And I just adamantly refuse to have any apps just because I'm the one that says it doesn't work. I'm not changing anything, but it's like, no, no, I'll sit on the phone and wait for you to do it for me. Okay, and it's going to happen in some way, shape, or form. The companies are going to concede. They're going to say, this is not a young man, but he's not a person that doesn't understand computers. But we have to give in because we made this allowance for the elderly people who will never be able to do this for themselves. So, so and so we're in a, and again, that's where it comes down to. And big business is consuming everything little business used to be good at. That's a movement that we can't even put a finger on just yet. But I know for a fact, even if I just want to book a haircut, I know my guy. I know the person. I don't call him on the phone anymore. He tells me to go through a national booking system because they take the reservation or whatever you call it, the appointment. They take the payment. They take my payment on their system. So if I don't show up for the appointment, they charge my card anyway. And he likes that. But he's no longer an independent businessman. He's very dependent on this national service that some hedge fund created. So we're
Right.
in a
We're
situation where
screwed. We're screwed.
we're screwed. We can't change that. And it's
But
kind of
that's
like,
the point, that we can change that. We have to change that. Otherwise, it's a runaway freight train. If you look at when Reagan came in and that trickled down nonsense, and they started throwing people off of Social Security and disability insurance, and they started this whole thing with Reagan. I don't know, people say, oh, Ronald Reagan. I mean, to me, he was the arch enemy who was really starting this whole movement of taking more away from the poor and giving more to the rich. It's that reverse Robin Hood. That is not going to change as long as the billionaires run the world. And you know what is so horrible too about this outsourcing is that they outsource a lot of production to third world countries where they have no protection against pollution, against uh, you know, poison. And people are like, I watched the video years ago about the fast fashion industry and how they're polluting the rivers and making the people sick, and there's no care for the earth whatsoever. It's all about money.
yeah.
And here I want to tell you, Jeff, that my perspective is very simple in a certain way, very, very simple. The purpose of an economy and the purpose of a society is to provide for the needs of people and the earth. That's the only reason to have one.
So, and that's a beautiful thing. And I would love to say I would like to see that happen. But as you come to realize, like you said, the way it's been trending, this is nothing new. Project
Yeah.
2025 is nothing new. It's funny, I talk about Project 2025, and there's people that have even voted for it and say, I didn't know this. And I said, do you realize the one most Googled item in Google's history, the most Googled item was the Brexit? After the British exit, the British people said, what did we just do? They didn't know what they voted for. Well, essentially, Project 2025 falls into that same category. No one knew what they were voting for, but yet the people who put it in place knew very well what they were going to accomplish when it was voted for. The president didn't have 100 executive orders. They're extremely complex. They can't be done in 24 hours. They were
Right.
done though. They were ready for his signature.
That's right.
So, and
Right.
they're extremely complex. The amount of thinking and the amount of and I'm not giving any credit to Donald Trump. He had nothing to do with putting these puzzles together. They were done for him. But the whole coordination was there long before he got elected, and the hope was he would get elected. Which brings me to all other points, so many other points that I won't get into is how he got elected. But it's not an election robbery. I'm proud to be a part of the party that acknowledged we were beat and administered a peaceful transformation of power. I'm very proud to be a part of that party. There's nothing, he did not steal the election. But the reason he got elected is because so many missteps of Democrats, the party, the leadership. I ran for office as a Democrat. I know what the leadership is all about. I'm very unimpressed with their approach. And so to think for a minute we could turn back this tide, I'm not so sure that the Democratic leadership even wants this tide turned back. I'm sure it works for them.
No,
I'm sure it works for them very
no,
well.
no. I mean, I think the point is we, the people, I wrote something called the New Declaration of Independence. And it's a what do you call it? Thing that you sign, a petition that you sign. And I put it in, it's in the media kit, uh, the stream.info/next steps. And where it says, see, I have this inner voice that I call God or the universe or whatever it is. Just got it, and it talks to me. And I heard that I should write a new Declaration of Independence, which meant that I had to go back and read the first one, right? And when I read it, it said very clearly that if the government is not supporting life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we have a right, and it becomes oppressive. We have a right to remove it and replace it with something else. Nobody tells us that. Nobody reminds us that we're not talking about just the British. We're talking about any dictatorship, any autocracy, any king. And we have a right to stop it and put in something different. But we are so brainwashed. Um, you know, what you're talking about the Democratic leadership, I could not agree with you more. But there are people in that party and outside the party who really want change, who want positive change. We'll never fix this by tinkering at the edge. We have to change the whole damn thing. And in the new Declaration of Independence, I talk about switching from a competitive capitalist society into a cooperative society where you have co-ops, where you have people working together, where we stop competing with one another and start certain things. As a spiritual activist, I have three main principles, and I have more than that, but the three main ones are oneness, accountability, and mutual support. And that means that we realize that this whole ethic of dog eat dog and competing with each other are sick, are not normal, are not healthy. People compete, and I can explain where all that comes from if I talk about the ego, which is another topic. Maybe we'll get into. I'd love to. But we believe from the time we're children, we're competing for the attention of our parents. We're competing with our own siblings. We go into school, the first thing we're doing is competing for grades. We're I'm a counselor, and I've seen young people, they haven't even gotten out of junior high yet, and they're worrying about what their career is going to be with their 401k. They are so geared to money. It's all about money and money and money and money. And nobody is telling them that what we need is a society of people who cooperate and support one another. And ironically, people who say, oh, you're a communist or you're a socialist. Well, actually, the definition of communism is from each according to their need, to each, no, to each according to their need, from each according to their ability. And that is the definition of a potluck. Isn't a potluck, you bring what you've got and you take what you need, and it all works out, doesn't it? But nobody says that's socialism. See, I call it the potluck revolution, where we begin to understand that we come together, that everybody brings their gift, what you have. Maybe you're a carpenter and you're not meant to be a CEO of a corporation, but you become a CEO because your father wants you to be a CEO, and you've given in at a very early age, the thinking that making money is more important than peace of mind or that caring or feeling like you're of value, that we have to really look at that and say, I don't care. I'm disabled. I've been sick my entire life and physically ill, but I have certain gifts. I can talk. That's what I do. And I look at the people who are out there marching or doing other things and I say, wow, look at them. I said, no, you do what you can do. You bring what you have. This one brings what they have. It's the potluck. And together we raise that barn. This is American as apple pie. And but we're not taught that. We're taught to compete at such an early age, and it becomes so intense that people become incredibly stressed. They don't trust each other. They're fighting with each other to climb the ladder and all of that. And everybody is emotionally distraught. It's a sick society. I worked for many corporations as a clerical worker, or as a factory worker. I did my time working those kinds of jobs. And I saw that the people on top were just as sick as everybody else. They're stressed, they're anxious, they're competing, they're afraid, they're insecure. This is no way to live. This is not a world of mutual support where you know that somebody's got your back and that you can just do what you can and bring what you bring to the table.
Well, if we're unable to turn the tide to something like you just presented, what would be the plan B? I would have to ask you that. What would be the, because I don't say it's impossible. Nothing's impossible. And who knows after this next 4 years what people will embrace, because there's a lot of people saying we got it wrong. But I'm gonna tell you, I love what you're saying. I don't necessarily agree with everything you're saying, but I like what you're saying. But I'm thinking about, for example, right now, the person that seems at the forefront of the Democratic movement, the only person I can think of is Angio Ocasio-Cortez. She seems to be the one. And I've literally got about 12 pages on my desk of complaints from her constituents about her, the way she does things. One is she's darting around wherever she's going on private jets. So we talk about her progressive movement. A true progressive, whether they're working for an hourly wage or depending on the government for every dime they get, never travels on a private jet. Now that's her thing. She's apparently unavailable. She's never in her office. Her office barely ever answers the phone when their constituents call. And it's not a big district. Now, granted, it's not a small district, but there should be people that answer the phone. And I have the list right here. I don't know who published it, but it seems pretty accurate. But if that's if you're not leading by example, what hope do you have of conveying a message that that people want to follow you? She's already contemplating a run for president. By all means, run for president. But the problem that I have is, does that put us in a position where we're actually in more trouble than we were 60 days ago? If our candidate is truly a person that can't even lead by example. She's darting around on private jets before she's a representative. Representatives generally fly to Washington on commercial flights. So I don't know where she's getting this money to fly around on private jets. And I believe it is so because I've heard it numerous times. What is our hope? What is our plan B? What is our, if we can't turn back the clock to be like you said, we started with a barter system. Warren Buffett has referred to it as a barter system. When you read The Old Man and the Sea, you pretty much understand the barter system, but you also realize the old man, the most skilled fisherman, is down to zero at an old age without even money to buy a cup of coffee. And that's where we are today. So, and if we can't turn back the tide, if even in the old days, the old man was left without a cup of coffee, and that's where we're winding up today. What is the plan B? Is my question, because I don't. When you say, yeah, you can wind up with a Game Boy, or yeah, you can wind up with an Xbox, and everybody's anxious to get the newest iPhone. It's almost like a national holiday when iPhone comes out with the next iPhone. Everybody's anxious to get the coolest car. Everybody wants a beautiful house. If we're going to say that may not be an option for everybody, what is the plan B is my question. Or if we can't roll back the clock to be so more beneficial for all, what the question is, what is the plan B?
Okay, that's an interesting point. Now, I don't know that what you said about Alexandria Cortez, I don't know that that's accurate. I'm not saying you're wrong. I really don't know, and so I can't comment on that. But what she is saying needs to be heard. And she is traveling around on a brutal schedule with Bernie Sanders, who I trust and who's been out there in the trenches for decades, being as unpopular as you can be. And I really respect him for what he did. And the Democratic Party shut him down because they felt threatened, because they don't want to look at the system. So anybody who starts talking about the system is a real threat. And not all progressive people will actually even talk about the things that I'm talking about, because I'm talking about something even deeper than that. I'm talking about the way the economy is structured is the problem. And if we don't change that, nothing will change. In a certain sense, there is no plan B. It's like if you have cancer, you either cure the cancer or you're dead. You know what I mean? You can't say, well, if you can't cure the cancer, then, well, okay, so you give yourself a few more years to live. So I think that what we need to do is wake up to the reality of the way the system works and to recognize that all the rest of us on the bottom, have been turned against one another through racism, through misogyny. Okay, if you live in an idea that you have to compete for power and that you need power, then a husband and wife, or a wife and wife, and a husband and are going to be competing for power in their own family. I'm a counselor. Jeff, I see it every day. If I get more power, you're afraid you're going to lose your power. We're based on fear. We fear each other. We don't feel the oneness. We don't care. We don't trust each other. We don't care about one another. And we're always fighting one another for power. I see it all the time in families, in relationships. And then you go out there. I have a principle. I wrote a book called Living with Reality, where we are, what we could be, and how we get there, or who we are. I can't even remember. Uh, and I look at it and I say, here is the inner revolution. This is the shift of consciousness that we need. And it comes right, if you're asking me what a plan B is, I'm going to tell you what my plan B is, which probably isn't what you're thinking.
No, I want to
My,
hear it though.
okay, my plan B is create the world you want to live in now. We resist Trump. What's happening to immigrants is beyond belief. I mean, it's
Unconscionable.
unconscionable. And not just immigrants. What's happening to healthcare, the Medicaid,
Unconscionable. I
unconscionable.
forget what the PA governor, Josh Shapiro, just said. Pennsylvania governor said something like 150. I can't quote. I'm not going to say a number. Hospitals are closing.
Right.
Hospitals are closing for no other benefit than a tax deduction for the very, very wealthy. And there is, for a fact, companies that haven't paid any taxes that are going to they're going to get an additional tax deduction. So it's just sick.
It is sick. It is very sick. But it didn't come out of nowhere and it didn't start with Trump. So it's been building gradually as capitalism has reached its heyday of of being as corrupt and power hungry as it possibly can be. And somebody has to cut the bottom out from under that. And that would be us, where we say, for instance, I read that in Germany, every corporation has to have 50% representation of the workers. You have to have, in other countries, you have healthcare is a right, which is obvious to me. Um, in other places, childcare is made available. So there are things that support people that other people have that we don't have. and that we have worse and worse health outcomes since they have been cutting back. Now they're cutting back on Planned Parenthood. So women, so many women who live on, who have Medicaid aren't going to get any in medical care. I mean, they don't care if they kill us, honestly. So, okay, so we know that. So we fight all those things. We stand up and we demonstrate, or we write letters to the editor, or we call our senators and try to stop it. But that isn't going to solve the problem, because then we can only go back to where we were when Biden was president, which is what led to this. It was already happening. People were already suffering, and when people are afraid and suffering, what do? They look for a scapegoat. We don't have to look anywhere past Germany. And we know that's the reparations. Germany had to pay reparations. People were all freaking out. They found a scapegoat, the Jews, right? And the gypsies and the gays and the communists, right? So we know that people have to wake up and realize, I wrote a book called God's Little Aphorisms. It's just a delightful little book, and it's just these sayings that came to me from the other side, from my spiritual awakening. And one of them is, you cannot clean the air over one house in Los Angeles. I don't care
Right.
if you're the richest man in the world, your air is going to be polluted.
Yeah.
So it's the whole idea is to rethink who we are, that we are connected, every one of us connected. We have this myth in our society that people are individuals, right? The myth of the individual. And when people say, yeah, I'm an individual, I'm really self-reliant, I say, yeah, you grow your own food, you grow your own cotton, you make your own clothes, you went out there and you made that asphalt road that you're going to drive in the car that you made from the steel that you milled. So it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. We aren't individuals. And not only aren't we individuals in terms of, we are all products of a society that teaches us and brainwashes us from early education about who we are and what we can expect, and from our parents who are sold out a long time ago because, oh yeah, after the war, I was going to get a television. So all of this, and you were just talking about that I have to have the newest iPhone. So we have to start awakening people to the fact that we are a collective, we need one another, and there's no shame in that, and that
Well,
nobody's an individual. And we have to start thinking for ourselves, because so many people parrot what they were taught by their parents and by the society and never let themselves think.
well, we are we are codependent. We, like you said, we don't build our own roads. We don't build our own cars. Even the Amish. I once met an Amish kid I worked in restaurants my whole life. I was a manager of a restaurant. An Amish kid left the farm. His parents told him, "You're going to starve." He said, "You're not going to starve. If you come work here, you can eat every day, even on your day off. Come in and eat something." I don't. But he would tell me, even though they didn't own a car, when it came time for something they needed a car for, they would knock on the neighbor's door and the neighbor would give them a ride. So, I mean, it was just funny to me. It's not a hypocrisy, it's just a reality. You can't, today's day and age, you can't horse and buggy everywhere. I mean, and if a hospital closes that was near the farm, you're going to have to utilize that car more often than before.
You call.
So, and so we are, and that's again where we're, like you said, or we kind of agree to disagree on the point that if we are codependent on one another, how do we work off each other's off each other's success stories? So investment comes into that, and all I've ever said on to that point is, and I'm not saying all I've ever said, I've built that point over and over again, is that people need to understand young people need to understand investment at a young age. If we're going to keep growing this, the economy is going to continue to grow, right? Like I used to have a hardware store that I absolutely adored. I would go there. I remember one time we had a crib in the house, and I took it apart 10 years earlier, and then we had another child. I was trying to put it together. I didn't have the screws. I loaded everything in the back of my pickup truck, and I rode to this hardware store, and the lady that owned it went out in the back of my truck and put it together with me and charged me like $6 for all the screws. She gave me coffee. She gave me coffee cake that she had made at home the night before. We talked for almost an hour about all kinds of stuff, including my new child coming home. And now it's gone because Ace Hardware kind of pummeled it out of business. They opened up across the street and everybody gravitated that way. It was called Willits. It was a great hardware store. I thought,
I
okay, big business has consumed Willits. Now the world is over. Because all I know is that lady was fun to drink coffee with, even if I didn't have nothing else to buy or if
But
I was
we
just.
don't have to live that way. And so plan B, which I haven't really articulated yet, is we co-create the world we want now. We start to relate to one another. See, if you're smarter than I am in certain ways, I want you to be smarter than me. Because if you're smarter than me, you may come up with an idea that I can't come up with. You're the one who may cure cancer. You're the one who may realize something, or you're the one who's going to do the hard labor that I can't. Because if everybody was Beth Green, there'd be no food on the table because we'd all be lying in bed all the time. I have gifts. I'm very intuitive. If I do a session, a counseling session with somebody, I go into their psyche and I see things from deep inside them that they don't even know exist. I have an extraordinary gift. Okay, that gift alone, I would die. Somebody has to bring me food. My husband does everything physical in this house. He has some cognitive impairment. And he doesn't make money. I do. It's so obvious that if he doesn't do his job and I don't do my job, we do not survive. And that is, if you look at the whole society, the cleaning lady is getting paid shit because she's doing housework, which has no value. But I need that cleaning lady. I need her as much as she needs me. And we all need each other. We have to shift what's between our ears, our thinking that we have to compete with each other. We need to support one another to be strong, to be well. They say, oh, I don't want undocumented workers to be or people to get medical care. No, you'd rather they have tuberculosis and sit next to you on the bus.
No, and it's just like we totally agree on that point too. I even take it a step further because I actually on this podcast I interviewed Temple Grandin, an incredible autistic scientist, an incredible professor, it's incredible success story. She talked about her education and the trials and tribulations of her education. And if we, just like you said, the fact of the matter is it may be an autistic child that could cultivate the cure to
Yes,
cancer, but
right.
we don't harness like we talk about rare earth minerals in Ukraine. Our
Yeah,
children at every level are rare earth minerals. Our autistic children, she talked about this incredible ability she has when she's on a glass elevator and she sees all the wheels and all the widgets and all the
yeah.
um bearings. She understands them. And there's a lot of people, there's a shortage of people that know how to fix these types of elevators. This is an incredible thing we've dismissed. We have
Exactly.
no investment in these people.
Exactly.
And I say these people, it's so wrong that I use that term because it's kind of, I remember Ross Perot saying, you people, you people. I'm not saying that. We've made no investment in our
In
autistic children.
ourselves,
And
in our humanity, in who we are. Somebody has to be the shaman. Somebody has to be the janitor. Somebody has to do, know that this idiot, the Secretary of Agriculture, said that we should replace all these immigrant.
undocumented workers, immigrants that we've deported now, we're going to have to replace them. They've been deported.
Right, right. With people on Medicaid who obviously know everything about farming. The stupidity of this administration puts things in such a perspective of like, Are they complete morons? And I shouldn't use the word moron because that's an insult to morons. You know what I mean?
But
It's like,
the idea of him making that suggestion goes against every premise of the conservative movement, because what you've got now, what you're essentially saying is if you're on welfare, we want you to work for the welfare check, and then you're becoming a socialistic state. You're employing poor people. You're giving them a government check to work, which is the argument that conservatives always have. We don't want that. So one way or another, he's contradicting his own party's views that there's been the idea that people should work for welfare checks, and then there's been the idea, no, we don't want a welfare state. So it's like you really have no plan. All you're really planning to do is continue to forcefully remove people from the country for no reason other than you've never given them a path to legalized citizenship to begin with. So now you're calling them out for not being legal, and the whole thing is, just like I said before, unconscionable.
well, yes, and it's throwing red meat to your base, so you have somebody to hate and feel superior to. We grow up feeling like we've got to be superior to the next guy. I've got to be more beautiful than the next woman in order to get the good husband. I have to be smarter. I have to do better in school in order to get into the good school. It's a competitive way of. I started a program years ago called Unleashing the Power of Kids as an experiment. And what we emphasized was critical thinking, service, and non competitive games. And the kids loved it.
And we should
The,
have that in every school.
oh, I do too. But see, I didn't have any support. And the kids loved it. And the kids loved doing service. And the kids were doing stuff in the house and they were helping and they felt valuable. Everybody, you see, it's the inner revolution. We need to stop competing with each other and we need to see each other as assets, that together we are the whole. Together we are going to solve these problems. And if you hurt one person, you're hurting yourself. There is no separation, and that person who is distressed and is driving down the road taking cocaine could kill you.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about that? When you say about that particular course, that right there, I want to say about that. I've said, you know, I've said there's all kinds of information we don't provide our children. And there's been a logic that you can't revamp the entire K through 12 public education system, because one of the reasons is the teachers union is the most powerful union in the country, potentially the most powerful union in the world. But I've said let's do after school. Let's do after school online curriculum. Let's make it available. Let's make it optional. Let's make it incentive based. Pick your course you want to learn about, something like that. Something about investing. Pick whatever you want. And make it even incentive based. Somehow, if you complete it, if you complete all the expectations, if you write a short essay as a part of the final project, you get a $25 gift card from Amazon, because there's so much information out there. Like, just like you said, you didn't have the support, you didn't have that class was incredible to teach kids that vantage point, to understand what it is to do all the little things, you know. And we don't do any of that. There's zero initiative on that front to teach kids things outside the K through 12 curriculum.
Well, yes, and to teach people a new way of thinking.
A
And you
new
know
way
what?
of thinking.
Yeah, and what was so fascinating, it was the parents who didn't support that program. The kids loved it, and the parents didn't want to be bothered bringing them. I saw it because it was too threatening to their own way of thinking and being. The parents, have been brainwashed into being competitive. They have to justify their own behavior. It's like, is what's happening in our world today bad enough that we're going to stop and say, what the fuck are we doing? The
Right.
purpose of the society and the economy is to meet the needs of people and the earth. And are we doing that? We're failing. We're failing and we're going down. And that's the way it is. And all we still see is we go for profit, profit. It's money. We have money in our eyeballs. And it isn't money. You know what people need is love and support. And basic needs too. I'm not saying we don't need food, but we need healthy food. We need healthy, clean water. We need forests that are not being cut down for some timber company to make a profit. We need the earth. We need one another. If we don't accept that shift in our thinking, I don't think anything really is going to change.
Well, I'm really looking forward to being a part of making I'm really been looking forward to being a part of making some of that happen. We both are. We both are. You haven't stopped in 6 decades, or like you said, literally 8 decades, 7.5 decades, really, and and I haven't stopped in my 2.5, nearly 3 decades. I'm not going to stop. You know, when I ran for office, I used to say, I don't raise money, I raise awareness. Well, that was, again, unconscionable in the political world. They were like, you're naive, you're an idiot, you're never going to get. I didn't get anywhere in the political game of as far as getting elected to some position. But as far as raising awareness, now I'm on the right track. I'm doing what I want to do.
That's
And
why I'm doing this podcast. That's
yes,
why I'm
exactly.
speaking to you in the hopes that if one person who's listening to us has a light bulb go off in their head and say, I want to co-create a new way of being. And one way that we can do it right now is the way we treat one another, how we treat our employees if we have them, how we treat our the people we come in contact on the phone, in the call centers, in the way we structure things, what we're teaching our children, and the courage that it takes to step outside the culture that we have, that destructive, competitive, exploitative, stressful culture, and say, no more, no more. I am going to do everything I can to make this world right now a better place while I'm resisting what's going on, while I'm resisting Trump. I can't resist Trump and be competing with the guy next to me for in our political organization. It's all comes down to the ego, which is a long topic, and I know we're about out of time. But
No, we're not out of time, but we did say we both said I think sometimes if we go past the hour mark, we lose people. So I would like to that point, I would like to invite you back. And I don't absolutely I have all your information, so I'm going to email you. I do want you to tell us this is Political No Brainer podcast. I've got Beth Green. Just tell us something about one of your books, anything in particular you want to leave the show with.
well, I do a live stream every week called Lighting the Way with Beth Green and Friends. And I talk about all these things from the inside out, not just about what's happening on the outside, but why it's happening and how we're reacting and what we can do. And that's, you can find me on facebook.com/Granny Rocks On. I've also
I
got a
like
YouTube
that.
channel at Beth Green TV. Also, every week I do a live stream of music to get us into a place of calm and relax. We have to be calm. We have to be well in order to keep this fight going. We can't get "Ah!"
Right.
We have to be well. I know this. I mean, my history, I've been in every movement and I've got burnt out and it was really something else. And then I've got the healingartsnetwork.org, healingartsnetwork.org, and I've got 6 books, 6 albums of music, blogs, videos, and it's all free. All of it is free online. And living with reality is about how we are going to shift our consciousness. This is not a simple thing. And I talk about the ego and so on. And I even have a little book called The Handbook for the Inner Revolution about oneness, accountability, and mutual support. So, I mean, I do tons of free things. And I also um, do counseling, of course, if anybody is interested. And I help people to find out what's inside them that's blocking them from their joy and being the totality of who they are. I'm not saying I'm going to make you rich. I'm going to try to help make you well. which is way more important.
Yeah, health is wealth.
Health as well, and not just physically well, I mean, emotionally and spiritually well. And finally, I want to mention the stream.info/next steps. I don't know if you can put them up on your screen. My nonprofit corporation is called The Stream. And we have a small website, the stream.info, that gives you a general idea of who we are, what we're trying to do. We're a nonprofit educational corporation. And if you click on the stream.info/next steps, you'll see the new Declaration of Independence, where we talk not only about what we're resisting, but what we want. We need a positive vision to coalesce around, because I don't think it's a question of Republicans and Democrats. I think it's about coalescing around finding what it is that we're all looking for. And I think that's what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is good at, is really getting people rallied around something more positive. But I have something even beyond that. And the new Declaration of Independence talks about what we need to do. Um, and there's a lot of other things, all kinds of resources, music, all kinds of resources to help support people to not only live through these times, but improve. Because we have to take these challenges, turn shit into fertilizer.
Got it. Well, the big thing, email me all that and I will put it up with the link to
Ian,
this.
did you get the media kit?
I got the media kit, so we will put that up. That's all there. I have the media kit. So
Okay.
that will be a part of this and I will send you an email when this is up and running. It'll be on all the outlets. It'll be on Spotify, it'll be on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and all that. And politicalnobrainer.com. So this is Political No Brainer. Like, share, subscribe, and comment. And I will be having you back on this show, Beth.
I
Thank you
would,
so much, Beth Green.
it's been a great conversation. I
I love
really,
it. I love it. I can't wait to do it again. I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you for being so generous with your time. I'll talk to you soon. I'll be emailing you real soon.
okay.
Thanks,
Bye.
Beth.